Have you heard about HIV/AIDS? Most likely, you have. But do you really know what it is? HIV stands for Human Immunodeficiency Virus. To understand what that means, let's break it down. H standing for human. This particular virus can only affect human beings. I stands for immunodeficiency. HIV weakens your immune system by destroying important cells that fight disease and infection. A deficient immune system can't protect you. And V stands for virus. A virus can only reproduce itself by taking over a cell in the body of its host. HIV is a lot like other viruses, including those that cause the flu or the common cold. But there is an important difference. Over time, your immune system can clear most viruses out of your body. That isn't the case with HIV. The human immune system can't seem to get rid of it. That means that once you have HIV, you have it for life. We know that HIV can hide for long periods of time in the cells of your body, and that it attacks a key part of your immune system, your T cells or your CD4 cells. Your body has to have these cells to fight infections and disease, but HIV invades them, uses them to make more copies of itself, and then destroys them. Over time, HIV can destroy so many of your CD4 cells that your body can't fight infections and diseases anymore. When that happens, HIV infection can lead to AIDS, the final stage of HIV infection. However, not everyone who has HIV progresses to have AIDS. AIDS stands for Acquired Immunodeficiency Syndrome. To understand what that means, let's once again break it down. A stands for acquired. AIDS is not something you inherit from your parents. You acquire AIDS after birth. I stands for immuno. Your body's immune system includes all the organs and cells that work to fight off infection or disease. D stands for deficiency. You get AIDS when your immune system is deficient or isn't working the way it should. S stands for syndrome. A syndrome is a collection of symptoms and signs of disease. AIDS is a syndrome rather than a single disease because it is a complex illness with a wide range of complications and symptoms. AIDS is the last stage of HIV. You are considered to have progressed to AIDS if you have one or more specific OIs, certain cancers, or a very low number of CD4 cells. If you have AIDS, you will need medical intervention and treatment to prevent death. Going back to HIV, when HIV enters your body through sexual contact, transfusions with infected blood, or by injection with a needle that has infected blood in or on it, researchers believe that the virus attaches to a specific type of immune system cell called a dendritic cell. HIV can infect multiple cells in your body, including brain cells, but its main target is the CD4 lymphocyte, also called a T cell or CD4 cell. When a CD4 cell is infected with HIV, the virus goes through multiple steps to reproduce itself and create many more virus particles.
Each step is crucial to successful replication and is therefore a potential target of antiretroviral drugs. Step 1 is the infection of a suitable host cell, such as a CD4-positive T lymphocyte. Entry of HIV into the cell requires the presence of certain receptors on the cell surface. CD4 receptors and co-receptors such as CCR5 or CXCR4. These receptors interact with protein complexes, which are embedded in the viral envelope. These complexes are composed of two glycoproteins, an extracellular GP120 and a transmembrane GP41. When HIV approaches a target cell, GP120 binds to the CD4 receptors. This process is termed attachment. It promotes further binding to a co-receptor. Co-receptor binding results in a conformational change in GP120. This allows GP41 to unfold and insert its hydrophobic terminus into the cell membrane. GP41 then folds back on itself. This draws the virus towards the cell and facilitates the fusion of their membranes. The viral nucleocapsid enters the host cell and breaks open, releasing 2 viral RNA strands and 3 essential replication enzymes: integrase, protease, and reverse transcriptase. Reverse transcriptase begins the reverse transcription of viral RNA. It has 2 catalytic domains: the ribonuclease H active site and the polymerase active site. Here, single-stranded viral RNA is transcribed into an RNA-DNA double helix. Ribonuclease H breaks down the RNA. The polymerase then completes the remaining DNA strand to form a DNA double helix. Now, integrase goes into action. It cleaves a dinucleotide from each 3' end of the DNA, creating 2 sticky ends. Integrase then transfers the DNA into the cell nucleus and facilitates its integration into the host cell genome. The host cell genome now contains the genetic information of HIV. Activation of the cell induces transcription of proviral DNA into messenger RNA. The viral messenger RNA migrates into the cytoplasm, where building blocks for a new virus are synthesized. Some of them have to be processed by the viral protease. Protease cleaves longer proteins into smaller core proteins. This step is crucial to create an infectious virus. 2 viral RNA strands and the replication enzymes then come together and core proteins assemble around them, forming the capsid. This immature viral particle leaves the cell, acquiring a new envelope of host and viral proteins. The virus matures and becomes ready to infect other cells. HIV replicates billions of times per day, destroying the host's immune cells and eventually causing disease progression. Drugs which interfere with the key steps of viral replication can stop this fatal process. Entry into the host cell can be blocked by fusion inhibitors, for example. Inhibition of reverse transcriptase by nucleoside inhibitors or by non-nucleoside reverse transcriptase inhibitors is part of standard antiretroviral regimens. The action of integrase can be blocked. Protease inhibitors are also part of standard antiretroviral therapy. Each blocked step in viral replication is a step towards better control of HIV disease.
On another note, how did this virus come to be in the first place? The origin of AIDS and HIV has puzzled scientists ever since the illness first came to light in the early 1980s. For over 20 years, it has been the subject of fierce debate and the cause of countless arguments, with everything from a promiscuous flight attendant to a suspect vaccine program being blamed. So what is the truth? Just where did AIDS come from?
For some of us who remember the sudden emergence of HIV into the popular culture and awareness of the US in the early 1980s, HIV appears to have come from nowhere. Rumors swirled about where it came from, how it came to infect people from all walks of life around the world. It's only now, after over 25 years of research and discovery, that we can finally start to say with some confidence where HIV came from. HIV is a lentivirus on the basis of its genome and life cycle. It's not all that unusual for the lentiviruses. It infects immune cells, primarily CD4 positive T cells and macrophages. The other lentiviruses pursue similar, if slightly different, life cycles. There are lentiviruses that infect cats, goats, horses, sheep, cows, and monkeys. There's even a puma lentivirus. Not all of them cause disease under certain conditions. For example, the simian immunodeficiency virus strain that infects African green monkeys doesn't usually cause much disease to its host. The rhesus macaque also has a strain of SIV that causes little or no disease. However, if you take a rhesus macaque, a monkey from Asia, and infect it with the SIV from the African monkey, or if you infect the African monkey with the Asian virus, the result is called simian AIDS, and it parallels what we see in humans. This observation led scientists to suspect that HIV has not been a human virus for very long. If it was a virus with a lot of history with humans, it's unlikely that it would still be so pathogenic. Where could HIV have come from? We sequenced the genome of thousands of strains of HIV, and while there was an incredible diversity of sequences at certain locations, they all had a strong homology to various SIV strains. We usually break up the strains of HIV into two main groups, the HIV-1 and HIV-2 species. The closest relative, according to sequence variations, for the HIV-1 strain was the SIV that infects chimpanzees. The closest relative of HIV-2, a viral species largely found in Africa, appears to be the SIV found in Sudi Mangabeys. Africa possesses far more of the subgroupings of HIV than any other continent. Europe and North America are dominated by a very narrow range of viral types, the Group M subtype B. This is suggestive but not confirmatory of an African origin for the parent strains. We know that SIV and HIV are both spread in the same ways, sex and blood transfers. Blood-to-blood exposures, however, are 900 times more likely to result in infection than sex contact. It's therefore likely that the transmission from primate to human, called a zoonotic event, was the result of hunters trapping, butchering, and eating chimps. The practice of hunting primates for what is called bushmeat is well documented in tribal groups in certain areas. So we have a strong suggestion of where to look: African monkeys. In fact, evidence of viral evolution suggested a certain region of western equatorial Africa. It was here that a colony of chimpanzees were found with a close relative of the ancestral strain of HIV. Based on mutation and divergence rates, we can place at least one transfer of virus from chimp to human at or around 1931 in the country now known as the Democratic Republic of Congo. There is some evidence to suggest that previous transfers of chimp to human may have occurred as far back as the 1880s, but it's not yet clear if these prior transfers had any ancestry to the current strains. The first clear case of verified infection in a human sample was in the 1960s, so the initial expansion was probably in the mid to late 50s, but may have been earlier. Since the human evidence is not available to us, that's a mystery that may never be unraveled. What was going on in the 1950s in Africa? Urbanization, for one. The cities of equatorial Africa experienced a population boom after World War II, along with colonial expansion. The world wanted the raw resources in Africa and needed local labor to extract it. This led to a disruption of traditional lifestyles and the rise of a post-industrial culture in a previously agrarian society. Prostitution and drug use may have increased as people left their towns and villages to find profitable work in the growing cities. They probably left their families and close communities behind, and many were no doubt lonely and isolated in this new cultural setting. It could be said that it was not African culture that led to the spread of HIV, but the effect of colonialism and industrialization in an area that had frequent contact with our close primate relatives. Previous zoonotic transfers of HIV, and it's likely that there were many over the centuries, from prey to hunter, were previously isolated by the low infection rate from anything but blood-blood contact. It was the addition of injectable drugs, prostitution, and urbanization that probably allowed HIV to escape the small region in which it frequently emerged. It appears that the next link in the chain was either to Haiti by direct immigration or directly to the US, Or it might have been spread to Europe by sailors on cargo ships and then to North America. The data is a bit spotty, but the emergence in the major cities of Europe was slightly after the disease was documented in New York and San Francisco. Asia and Russia may have been infected by a second wave of emergence, as their subtype profiles are markedly different than the European and North American subtypes. South America, Australia, and Northwest Asia are a possible third wave emergence. The popularized idea of the Canadian flight attendant as patient zero is very misleading.
There was a great deal of conjecture in the late 1980s about patient zero, identified as Gaetan Douglas, a Canadian flight attendant who purportedly knowingly infected as many as 250 men a year on both sides of the Atlantic, said to have single-handedly started the epidemic, but most of this is now largely discredited. Anyhow, no one ever believed that he was the first to be infected. Computer models have estimated that the first human infection occurred about 1930, give or take 20 years.
He was certainly not the first case outside of Africa or in North America, but he was the index case in a large cluster of 248 patients in 1983. The other origin rumors that are very prevalent are the man-made pandemic theories. For example, the oral poliovirus vaccine transmission theory, which has no basis in fact, but it satisfies the need some people have for a good narrative with a shadowy evil agency acting behind the scenes. The OPV hypothesis, advanced by BBC correspondent Edward Hooper and documented in his book The River, suggests that an SIV-contaminated chimpanzee culture was used to prepare the oral polio vaccine given in the late 50s and early 60s. His theory, which was effective at selling his book and ignited the imagination of conspiracy theorists, proposed that this SIV-contaminated vaccine culture humanized the simian virus. But as the evidence shows, HIV had emerged in its modern form prior to the polio vaccine era. The frozen vaccine lots of that time period were thawed and tested for the presence of either SIV or HIV by an impartial third party. It's also completely implausible that HIV is an engineered virus or bioterror agent. The state of molecular biology in the 1950s was rudimentary. The capability did not exist at the time to make the precise molecular changes needed to generate HIV from SIV. Even crude techniques like co-culturing of the simian virus with known human pathogens like influenza would have been unsuccessful. HIV shows all the hallmarks of a zoonotic jump, not design. For example, look again at the distribution of HIV clades around the world. Note that there is profoundly more diversity in Africa. How could we account for that if every continent had been infected at roughly the same time by the same virus? Here are the figures for the number infected. Why would Africa have such a high prevalence and only in certain areas? We could implicate cultural differences, but then why is there such a gradient of infection across African nations of similar culture and population composition? If all these populations were simultaneously infected, why would such large differences be apparent? As a scientist, I remain open to new evidence on this topic. However, accusation is not the same as evidence. Until the conspiracy theorists of the world do some real empirical testing, their claims can be dismissed out of hand.
Since the beginning of the epidemic, almost 78 million people have been infected with the HIV virus, and almost 39 million people have died of HIV. Globally, 35 million people were living with HIV, and this number continues to grow each year. An estimated 0.8% of adults aged 15 to 49 years worldwide continue to live with HIV, although the burden of the epidemic continues to vary considerably between countries and regions. According to UNICEF, while the prevalence of HIV and AIDS in the Philippines is still low, the country is one of the only 7 countries globally where the number of new HIV cases has increased by over 25% from 2001 to 2009. But what is more alarming is that many of the new victims are teenagers, with some as young as 15. Based on a study conducted by the Department of Health, more young Filipinos have acquired the virus. Data from the Philippine HIV/AIDS Registry showed that in January this year alone, 118 of the new HIV patients belong to the 15 to 24 age bracket. From 1984 to January 2014, 36 people below 15 years old were infected with HIV. For the same period, 429 aged 15 to 19 acquired the virus, as well as 3,467 in the 20 to 24 age bracket. Several factors put the Philippines in danger of a broader HIV/AIDS epidemic. They include increasing population mobility within and outside of the Philippine Islands, a conservative culture adverse to publicity discussing the issues of a sexual nature, rising levels of sex work, casual sex, unsafe sex, and injecting drug use. The disease is acquired via sexual intercourse, bodily fluid transmission, or through contaminated medical equipment. Of the 10,514 HIV-positive cases reported from 1984 to 2013, 92%, or 9,637 out of the 10,514, were infected through sexual contact. 4%, or 420 out of the 10,514, through needle sharing among injecting drug users. 1%, or 59 out of the 10,514, through mother-to-child transmission. Less than 1%, 20 out of the 10,514, through blood transfusion. And lastly, less than 1% through needle prick injury. Only 3. No data is available for 4% of the other cases, which is 375 out of the 10,514. So what happens to your body once you've caught the virus? As HIV disease progresses in your body, you may notice physical changes. Some changes may occur as side effects of medical treatment for HIV. Others may occur as a result of the impact that HIV or AIDS has on your body. Some medications you may take to control HIV cause changes in the way your body produces, uses, and stores fat. These changes are called lipodystrophy. This condition causes you to gain or lose fat in particular spots of your body. You can get extra fat in the abdomen, neck, breasts in both men and women, and the face. In addition, you can also develop small deposits of fat elsewhere on your body. Other changes can occur when the fat under your skin, called subcutaneous fat, is lost. This can occur in your face, arms, legs, and posterior. It is important to note that these changes in the way your body handles fat can also coincide with the changes in cholesterol, an increase in triglycerides, increases in blood sugar, and lowered sensitivity to insulin, which may lead to diabetes. Wasting syndrome is the involuntary loss of more than 10% of your body weight, in addition to more than 30 days of either diarrhea or weakness and fever. Wasting refers to a loss of muscle mass, although part of the weight loss may also be due to loss of fat. HIV-associated wasting syndrome is considered an AIDS-defining condition. While this is often a sign of late-stage disease, wasting syndrome can be treated by proper diet, medications to stimulate the appetite, medications to control diarrhea, and hormonal therapy to build muscle. HIV destroys a type of defense cell in the body called a CD4 helper lymphocyte. These lymphocytes are part of the body's immune system, the defense system that fights infections. When HIV destroys these lymphocytes, the immune system becomes weak and people can get serious infections that they normally wouldn't. So who are most likely to catch the virus? Every pair is technically at risk for HIV/AIDS, but the most at-risk group include men who have sex with men. From 2008 to 2010, new HIV infections increased 22% among the young, aged 13 to 24, gay and bisexual men, and 12% among gay and bisexual men overall. So how could you prevent yourself from acquiring the virus? Anybody can get HIV, but you can take steps to protect yourself from HIV infection. Get tested and know your partner's HIV status. Talk to your partner about HIV testing and getting tested before you have sex. Also, have less risky sex. Oral sex is much less risky than anal or vaginal sex. Anal sex is the most risky type of sex for the spread of HIV. In addition to this, use condoms. Use a condom every time you have vaginal, anal, or oral sex. Remember, no glove, no love. Limit your number of sexual partners. If you have more than one sexual partner, get tested for HIV regularly. Get tested and treated for STDs and insist that your partners do so too. Having a sexually transmitted infection can increase your risk of becoming infected with HIV. Talk to your healthcare provider about pre-exposure prophylaxis or PrEP. PrEP is an HIV prevention method that involves taking HIV medicine every day. PrEP is intended for people who don't have HIV but who are at high risk of sexually transmitted HIV infection. PrEP should always be combined with other prevention methods, including condom use. Don't inject drugs, but if you do, use only sterile drug injection equipment and water and never share your equipment with others. But what if you already have the virus? With proper treatment called antiretroviral therapy or ART, you can keep the level of HIV virus in your body low. ART is the use of HIV medicines to fight HIV infection. It involves taking a combination of HIV medicines every day. These HIV medicines can control the virus so that you can live a longer, healthier life and reduce the risk of transmitting HIV to others. Before the introduction of ART in the mid-1990s, people with HIV could progress to AIDS in just a few years. Today, a person who is diagnosed with HIV and treated before the disease is far advanced can have a nearly normal life expectancy. No safe and effective cure for HIV currently exists, but scientists are working hard to find one, and they remain hopeful. So what would you do if you think you have HIV? The only way to know for sure if you have HIV is to get tested. Testing is relatively simple. You can get an HIV test from your doctor or your healthcare provider, community healthcare centers, family planning clinics, and other locations. Also, there are FDA-approved HIV home test kits you can use. We hope this documentary has been helpful. And now, we hope you know more about AIDS. So no gay sex. Okay, that's it. That's all I'm gonna say. That's all I have to say.